Hello everyone, it's Brandon here from the Pilot Stud channel. I do hope you're all having a wonderful day. In January of this year, Flight Sim Studio released their E-Jet series to the flight simulator world. It had a very controversial release, with unrealistic expectations being set by their very glossy marketing campaign. This product was released as an early access product, where expectations had been set for a highly detailed product right out of the box. And because of that, to many it was seen as quite a controversial release. Well, as I often do with add-ons of all shapes and sizes, I have been keeping a good eye on the Flight Sim Studio E-Jet series, watching out for all the updates and improvements, and I have to say, in my humble opinion, it has got better. There's still a long way to go before I can outright fully recommend this product as a high quality airliner, but I have to say, right now it's great fun to fly, and it is definitely an aircraft I frequent often in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So join me today as I talk about Flight Sim Studios E-Jets 170 and 175 for Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now, as I've already said, I've sort of touched on the initial release. It was a very controversial release, to put it lightly. I don't necessarily think Flight Sim Studios meant for this to all happen, but they did create some really awesome trailers that presented this aircraft as a highly realistic, uber detailed airliner, and that didn't really ever come to happen. That's not to say it was ever bad. I don't think this could ever really be considered as a bad product, but I think some unrealistic expectations were set, probably due to some excitement by the developers, in my opinion. But aside from that, let's talk about the E-Jet series. Of course, most of you will be familiar with these aircraft in real life. Embraer is a Brazilian aircraft manufacturer, and the E-Jets are an incredibly popular domestic airliner and regional airliner. The Flight Sim Studio E-Jets family consists of the Embraer 170 and 175, with the E190 and 195 being released down the line. And they are incredibly popular in real life, with over 80 airlines flying the aircraft in the real world. Now that we've got that short snippet of real life information out of the way, let's talk about the product in its current state. Well, it has come a long way since January. To put it in numbers, it has received 13 updates, roughly at every 2-week interval, and this has allowed for some major improvements on both the 170 and 175. Notable improvements include a custom auto throttle, which was introduced on update 0.9.10 and then finalised in update 0.9.11. You definitely feel this when you enable auto throttle. No longer does the aircraft apply full power whenever it needs a little speed boost. It is all very much more measured and realistic. On top of that, this is a fantastic improvement. There has been some major performance improvements. This aircraft, when it was released back in January, was a stuttery mess. Well, no longer. It is uber smooth, even on my relatively mid-spec PC. You know, I've got a 3060 Ti and a Ryzen 560X. It's by no means a PC beast, but I have to say, flying around with a Flight Sim Studio E-Jets, my system was performing perfectly, very similar, if not better, when compared to the PMDG 737 performance. I would love to get some direct comparisons, but sadly I haven't been able to find any performance footage from when this aircraft was originally released in January. On top of that, hand flying has improved. Autopilot in some cases is still a bit temperamental, so at times you may find yourself needing to take control. Luckily, hand flying is really smooth, really realistic. I've never flown an Embraer, of course, in real life, but if I did, I imagine it would feel something like how this aircraft does in the simulator. It's very smooth through the air, and now a wonderful aircraft to land. On top of that, we've also seen SimBrief integration in the EFB, which allows you to import a flight plan and therefore import it into your McDo or MCDU. Some really great changes, I have to say, so well done to the guys at Flight Sim Studio. Of course, we're still waiting for stuff like VNav, but that's receiving focus now that the custom auto throttle is out of the way. And on top of that, Navigraph integration is next up, and this should be introduced in the next update, which will be 0.9.12. I have to say, 13 updates since release is very impressive. It's great to see Flight Sim Studio committed to their product, because of course they needed to do it. They said this was an early access product, so they could not afford to just sit it and leave it to collect dust. So while it is expected for a developer to update a product if it's in early access, I think we really are seeing some great developers here. 13 updates is a bucket load of work. Let me just speak about my flight experiences. I know I've already touched upon it, but performance is definitely the highlight for me. I think Flight Sim Studio have paid special attention to optimising the displays, and because of that you'll notice a big reduction in stuttering. The aircraft is a lot smoother, and because of that it's easier to fly. Most of you will be familiar with the fact that if your aircraft's stuttering, it's very difficult to hand fly the aircraft, because you're sort of fighting the aircraft with a 5-second delay. On top of that, in terms of autopilot, LNAV, lateral navigation, is far more accurate. This aircraft doesn't miss waypoints anymore, at least in my experience. ILS does work, it can bring you in for a quite nice instrument landing, but I wouldn't place too much faith in it, because as I said, autopilot is still a bit temperamental, so make sure if you are flying a long flight you don't take too much time out of the cockpit. And of course, as I've said, it is great fun to hand fly, just nice to do some circuits. All in all, it is much better. Still a lot of work is needed, but I am confident that the Flight Sim Studio team will live up to what they've said they're going to live up to, and bring this aircraft up to possibly PMDG standard. It is, at the end of the day, very enjoyable, and for that I can certainly recommend it now as an enjoyable aircraft to fly, with the caveat that this aircraft is still work in progress. A lot of the systems are quite two-dimensional, you know, they are basically displays telling you certain parameters of the aircraft as opposed to all being holistically linked. For the early access price of 30 Great British Pounds, up to 35 depending on what vendor you're buying it from, both the Flight Sim Studios E170 and 175 are very promising indeed, and I look forward to seeing the continued work. And of course, a big point as well is that the external model is absolutely breathtaking, and indeed the cockpit looks very pretty. Lighting is also very good, and don't forget you're getting two aircraft, the 170 and the 175, and a bunch of liveries for the price of one. And on that note, guys, well done to the Flight Sim Studios team. A lot of work is still needed, but at least personally I quite enjoy this aircraft. It's by no means the best aircraft from Microsoft Flight Sim, but definitely not the worst. So on that note, guys, it's time for me to wrap up the video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you around. Bye bye.